Welcome back to another tutorial. Now today I've got a beautiful colour combination, or at least I think it's a beautiful colour combination. It's a really autumnal colour selection which replicates exactly what's going on outside my window. So lots of pale pinks, rusts, burgundies and dark purples to create a fabulous design. Now you've probably already spotted I've got a vintage container here on my table. This is a piece of Dartmouth pottery and it's a gorgeous shape, and you know that boat shape is really quite fashionable at the moment. It's seeing a big resurgence and it's a very trendy style of design. I quite often do arrangements in vintage containers using wire mesh, but I'm going to use floral foam today. Even though the industry is moving away from using a lot of floral foam, the videos that I do using chicken wire aren't quite as popular. So that's why I've chosen to use floral foam today. I think more of you can relate to the floral foam. So it's a fairly narrow container. I've got half or a third of a block of floral foam. It's a bit too wide to fit in my container. So I'm just going to take off a centimetre or so from the edge, and then that's going to fit in more snugly into my container. I'm not going to worry about putting tape over the top to hold it into place because I'm not transporting it anywhere. But if you are doing this and you're going to be delivering it, then I would take a little bit of tape over the top. If it's just for home use, then it's fine as it is. And what I'm going to try and do is really copy the shape of the container. I'm going to start with gladioli to create my outline shape. My floral foam is neatly in the middle of my container. What you might see, or what you might notice when I show you the gladioli, is that the lower down flower heads are missing in this section here. And that's because I've already taken them apart and I used them in a couple of wedding designs that we did on the weekend. So normally a gladioli would look like this if I just hold the two alongside, but you can see I've taken off the heavier based flowers at the bottom. But that means I've got a softer, more fragile looking flower, which I think is going to suit this container. Whereas a whole gladioli like this is probably a bit heavy for this delicate container. So these little leftover pieces are going to come in quite handy for today. And what I'm looking at doing is creating the widths of my arrangement to be roughly twice the length of my container. And what I'm going to do is get two gladioli, which are by my side, and I'm going to cut them to a similar length. Now you don't have to do this, you don't have to remove the bigger flowers from the middle. It just happens to be that I had them here and I didn't want them to get wasted, and I thought that they would work quite well in this design. So what I'm going to do now is bring them out to the side. Now they're quite a severe line. It's quite a, you know, rigid, straight shaped flowers. So it might look a little bit out of place against the curve, the more softer curves of the container. But as I add in more flowers, that will soften. And what you can see is I've angled the gladioli heads forward because that will make the design a little bit more pleasing. I don't want them perfectly matching on either side. I don't want them to be an identical length and positioned in exactly the same way, because that makes the arrangement a little bit artificial. And then what I'm going to do, I think I've got three here. I'm going to remove that floppy section off the top because that's not going to do my arrangement any justice. I can add it in at the bottom later on, but I'm going to try and connect the two outside pieces by connecting it together in the middle with more of the gladioli stems, and this will give you a bit of profile as we work our way towards the front and give me a lovely clear outline shape. And that's how I like to work. I like to create an outline shape first and then almost fill in the middle by sort of joining the dots. So if we think of this as being almost like a crescent shape, that's the shape that I'm going to achieve when I get to the end. So it'll be fairly flat in the middle and curved on either side. Admittedly, my gladioli aren't particularly curved, but it's still following that line from one side through to the other. That little bud that I had, that I cut off the top, can come there towards the front. And what I'm going to do with the bigger gladioli is I'm going to cut the individual flower heads off, because the gladioli work really well as individual flowers, not just as a long whole stem. So if you're in the supermarkets and you particularly like a colour of the gladioli, but you can't imagine how you're going to apply that into a floral design, then consider cutting it down into smaller pieces, and then you'll get two beautifully sized heads to fit in any size arrangement. And I'm going to do the same, just going to pull that petal off, work that towards the front. Now these gladioli came in probably about 4 days, maybe 5 days ago, so it's given them a chance to open up. Whereas if you're buying them from the supermarket, they're likely to be more like this one here, where the heads are nice and tight. But they are really good value for money. They open up beautifully, and you'll be able to create some interesting designs. So this little last piece, consider what is the back, and there's not an even distribution, but I'm trying to link the colour from one side to the other. I'm building up a bit of a pattern as we go. Now I have a beautiful rose. This is a garden rose, not from the garden, but it's what a florist would call a garden rose. It's not quite open yet. This, believe it or not, is called Vintage Peach, but it's quite a pink colour, and it's going to go beautifully with my colour selection. We're going to pop one in at the front. I'm going to match that on the opposite side, but without making it perfectly symmetrical. So this one will be slightly longer and in a different position, and then I'm going to bring one more towards the centre. They are already cut short because they've been used in a previous design, but I didn't want to waste them. And by placing that one at the back, it starts to bring that colour all the way through. If I had more roses, I could bring the colour up to the side, but I've only got 3, and to go alongside them is this really fabulous little chrysanthemum. So this is a chrysanthemum bloom, and it's quite an unusual colour. It's a peachy sort of pink colour, but I think there's a really lovely link between the burgundy and the paler pink. I've only got 3 of these as well, and I am working facing the camera, so hopefully it looks right from your side. I'm going to bring 2 of them again on either side of that centre line. So if you think about a line running down the middle, I'm looking to create a balanced design on either side, but a design that's not perfectly matching. Another one on this side, and again they're cut short because I've used them in the previous design, and then my final one is going to pop there in the middle towards the front. I need to look at what I'm doing this time, so we'll spin it round. Anything that's round, carnations, dahlias, gerbera, or another type of rose would work just as well. But I'm looking really to balance off the colour, but without making it too patterned and too structured. A little bit of an informal design. And now I'm going to add in some greenery. So that's all my flower combination for the moment. I am a little bit conscious that I've got a very bare stem showing on this side. I'm hoping that by the time my greenery is in, that will be a little bit disguised and it won't quite look so ugly. But I'm going to continue trying my best to work with the design facing the camera so you can see how the arrangement builds up. Small foliage tucked down underneath that little rose. It's not quite a little rose, it's a fairly large rose. And my foliage of choice here for the outside is the eucalyptus. And that always has quite a nice curve and always works quite nicely on the outside. You could easily go slightly taller on one side and a bit shorter to make an asymmetrical arrangement. But with the flower selection I've got, this is the sort of shape that I visualised in my head. And I quite often get asked, you know, how do I know what shape to make and why do I choose that particular container? And that's often decided by the choice of flowers that I've got. So if I've got flowers that are very straight, very rigid, then I'll go for a fairly straight container. If I've got foliages like this that are quite soft, a bit whimsical, a little bit more relaxed, then I can do something that's more quirky and less heavily patterned. So sometimes it can be the choice of container, sometimes it can be the choice of flowers. That is my first port of call when I'm thinking about designing an arrangement. Now I'm going to introduce a real autumnal plant material. This is the copper beech. Now this is a preserved copper beech that we buy as a florist from the florist supplies. And if you have copper beech growing anywhere around you, then the best time to cut it is in August, and you can preserve it with some glycerine. But I've bought this one in for a wedding that we had on the weekend, and it's a lovely curved shape as well. So I'm hoping that it will give me a really lovely link. And you might not often think about putting brown and pink and burgundy together, but it is a really lovely colour combination. And pink comes from red, and so does the orangey sort of tones. That originally comes from red. So it all falls in the same part of the colour wheel. Okay, so if we spin that around, you can have a quick look at the back, just as I fill in with some more of the copper beech at the front. Beautiful textural material. It's fabulous to use in the autumn. I'm just going to make sure that the colour is fairly evenly spaced out. Now I don't have a huge amount of flowers in this arrangement. We've got 3 large roses, 3 chrysanthemum blooms, and then of course the stems of the gladioli. And I think that's given us a fairly interesting design without using too many flowers. Just going to slightly adjust this one. Now what I'm going to do with the stem of the gladioli here that is slightly annoying me because it's quite visual, I'm going to use the last of the gladioli that hasn't yet opened, and I'm hoping that's going to disguise that very bare stem. Sometimes bare stems work well in an arrangement, but it doesn't look quite so attractive in this design here. Depending on the camera angle, you might still be able to see the stem behind, but now that's given me a more stronger line that helps your eye travel from one side. Most of the material that I've got in there so far is quite heavy, it's visually heavy. The flowers themselves are quite big. So I'm going to add a little bit of soft eucalyptus, just again to give a light and an airy feel to the arrangement. This is dyed eucalyptus. As a florist, we can buy this in many different colours. The lighter shades I particularly like because I think they're a bit more realistic. But coming up to Christmas, you'll be able to get it in silvers and golds. It'll be glittered and sparkly, and it can bring a really gorgeous element to your arranging. But because I'm trying to create something that's quite vintage, a bit of a modern twist on a vintage design, that I felt that the asparagus fern was more in keeping with my very gentle vintage container. So I think one final piece just tucked down at the front there, and now that is going to look absolutely amazing on the centre of a mantelpiece. It would work equally as well on an altar or a small low down coffee table. If you're a vintage-aholic like I am, then try and find a container that's similar to this in a charity shop. And if you can't find a vintage container like this, or you don't want to spend out on vintage containers, then there are lots of bases like this available in home decor shops that have a much more current and relevant modern theme to them. So I hope you've enjoyed that one for today. A beautiful autumnal inspired arrangement. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, then please do so. Since this channel started, we have had well over 1 million views, and I'm hoping that by the time this video is aired, I will have hit the 10,000 subscriber mark, which is a really big achievement considering I had no idea how well this channel was going to be received. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to be informed every time I upload a new video. If you're interested in attending one of our online courses, then pop over to the website that I've listed below. There's a whole host of online courses that you can participate in from the comfort of your own home. And very soon, there's going to be a Christmas course for 2023. So thanks as ever for watching. Look forward to seeing you for the next tutorial, and goodbye for now.